The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you for attending this week's Pragmatic Works training. My name is Brian Steele. I'm one of the newer members of the Pragmatic Consulting team. I get my presentation to start. There we go. Sorry, I can't get enough stuff off my screen. All right. I'm one of the newest members of the Pragmatic Consulting team. A little bit about me. I've been working last 20 plus years in SQL, along with the Microsoft BI stack and developer stacks. For the last 6 years, I've been doing a lot of custom application and web consulting and development. So brings me a little more code-centric focus than you might get sometimes. So today we're going to get in there. We're going to look at some web apps. We're going to do some C# coding. We're going to look at some JavaScript functions. But even with that, if that's not your strength, don't worry about it. Microsoft and the Power BI team, they provide a lot of tools that can really help you along the way. So the current situation. Do you currently have a customer-facing application? Look like most of you do from the survey that Crystal put out there. Do you struggle with integrating that data for your customers? Well, some of you did, it looks like. Maybe about 50-50, and then what solution? It looks like I didn't do a very good job of picking some kind of random solutions to pick from. Most everybody picked, a lot of people picked other, but it seemed like the majority of people were on SSRS. So do you have a customer-facing application? And what do I mean by customer-facing application? Well, it can mean a lot of different things. It could be internal versus external customers, et cetera, things like that. For this particular topic, we're going to look specifically at external customers, someone that's outside of your organization, that is not a member of your Active Directory or your Azure Directory. Do you have a system in place that lets customers access data, enter data, view documentation, view reports, anything like that? And do you struggle with integrating that data for those customers? So have you tried to give your customers a better look at that information? Have you tried to help them make business decisions based off of that data? And what solution, if any, are you currently using? Do you have a roll your own HTML that you've created? Do you have a standard reporting tool like Crystal or SSRS? Do you have some code-based system like Telerik or some other .NET architecture that you're using for that? So those are just some of the things that we're kind of going to look at when we look at this, when we look at embedding Power BI in your application. So why would we want to do Power BI? Well, what end users want is they want built-in analytics to help them make business decisions. They also want access to that data real time or on demand. And they also want that, cool factor. They want the new thing. They want something that looks cool to them. And we all know that Power BI looks, if we've used Power BI before, you know that has that cool look. And what does your business want? You want to offer that in-context analytics to your customers. You also want to increase your user satisfaction. You want to give them something new that's going to help them drive them to use your application. And you want to attract new customers. Again, kind of goes into that cool factor. New users are going to be drawn to those visuals, to that visualization that you're going to get with a tool like Power BI. And so what's keeping us from doing that without Power BI? Well, investing in developer time is very costly. We're going to be building from the ground up. It's going to be complex, costly, time-consuming, and traditional third-party software licensing can be very expensive to be able to put that kind of functionality in your application. So really, it's going to come down to money for that. And what are some of the advantages that you're going to get with Power BI? Well, it's easy to connect to the data you need. You can connect to on-premise data. You can connect to data in the cloud. You can use multiple sources within the same solution. Data can be accessed in multiple ways. You can have it updated, or you can have real-time query. You can schedule refreshes whenever that's useful for your processes. You can also use things like streaming data, many other functionalities that we're going to get through the Power BI platform. It's also open and extensible platform through Azure. So in extended Power BI and embedded Power BI, you have the ability to apply capacity in Azure to your visualizations to improve the performance of them. So you can continue to extend that with almost no downtime to be able to meet the needs of your customers. You also have access to new advanced tools like streaming, machine learning, all of those things that you're going to have in Power BI. And best of all, you can access all the development tools, all the examples, all the resources for free. Embedding them in your site is going to cost you just a single Power BI Pro account. And that's what we're going to look at today. So embedding Power BI. There's kind of two different ways you can look at that. Embedding for your organization, or what's called user owns data, is a method that requires that the users of your application sign into Power BI service and when they want to view their content. Once someone's in your organization signs in, they'll have access to the dashboards and reports that they own or that have been shared with them through the Power BI service. This scenario is what you want when you want to expose your data to people inside your organization, inside your Azure Active Directory. And what you're doing there is when you really want to have Power BI in something like SharePoint Online or Microsoft Teams or Microsoft Dynamics, when you're trying to get that data to your actual users within your organization. But what we're going to look at today is the Power BI embedded, which is for your customers, or what they call the apps owns data method. And it's a Microsoft Azure service and lets independent software vendors and developers quickly embed visuals, reports, dashboards into an application through a capacity-based hourly meter model. It does require that you have a single Power BI Pro account. Use of the app the user of the app doesn't need to have or know anything about Power BI. And users do not need to log into Power BI or be a member of your Azure Active Directory to use the system. Okay, so now we know why we want to use Power BI. So let's get down to the how. There are basically 3 steps to embedding Power BI. First is authorizing Power BI analytics to your application. This lets the application manage the authentication and not the user. So you can also take advantage of things like row-level security, things like that, through that authorization. Number 2 is embedding. So we want to embed the Power BI visualizations into your application. We do this using Power BI REST APIs, which we can get simplified by using the wrapper classes and the Power BI.NET SDK. And then there's going to be interacting. So how are we going to control those visualizations? So we enable the client-side functionality with the Power BI JavaScript SDK. So we add that to the .NET SDK. Then we can do things like specific filters. We can define what pages we want to view. We can do all kinds of cool things with those visualizations by using JavaScript in our application. And there's a couple different ways that you can authorize an embedded application, but all of them roughly result in about the same functionality. So if you have an Azure Active Directory, you can register your application directly from there. If you have a large application, a lot of users on there, a complex organization, you'll want to do this route so that you can assess different roles and you can apply capacity to improve the performance on your visualizations. For the first example, we're actually going to use the Power BI embedded setup tool. It's a little bit simpler way to do it, but a good way to show for the demonstration. We'll need a Power BI Pro account to sign in with, and you can get one of those. You can get a trial account for 60 days when you sign up with Power BI. And you'll need to register your application. It will give you a name, define what APIs you want it to have access to, and these are broken down kind of into 3 different sections. View, if you just want your users to be able to view data. Edit, which if you want them to be able to actually drill down and do some editing in that data. And then you can actually give them the ability to create. So you can let them create their own functionality directly through your application without having access to Power BI. And then you'll need to create a workspace and then add content to that workspace, reports, dashboards, whatever other kind of visualizations you want to put in there to that workspace. So if you already have a workspace and you have content in that, you can just skip those steps. and then you'll have to grant permissions to your application for this authorized account. All right, so let's go in and do a little demo. I'm probably better at that than going through slides. All right, let's see. So as I said, there's lots of different ways you can go about doing this. We'll start with one of the simpler methods. So if you go to http://apps.powerbi.com and then go to embed setup. It's always fun. So we can get there a different way. Just thinking about it. Let's see if Edge helps us out here any. Okay, we'll try this. I'm not sure what the deal was there, but okay. We'll go in here, and so now you have the opportunity to pick which one of those two formats that we previously talked about. So you have the one for your internal organization, or the user owns the data, and then you have the one for your customers, or the app owns the data. So we're going to start with that. So we'll click there. We're going to sign into our account. So you have to have a Power BI Pro account. So I'm going to sign in there. Oh, that's actually the wrong account. Sign in. Okay. Don't think that my Pro account on that particular email address is going to expire in 20 days. And then we'll go to the next. So then you'll register your application. So we'll give it a name. That's going to be, and this will be the name that'll be displayed in Azure. And then we'll be able to select our API access that we want. So we'll call it Webinar 01. And then here we can select just read-only APIs. We can do read-write APIs, or we can also use the create API. So you can create your own. You can let the user create their own content. We'll go ahead and just do select all. You want to be a little more selective on that when you're setting those up for your end users. And then you can create a workspace. Like I said before, that the workspace, if you already have an existing workspace, you can just skip this. I'm going to go ahead and create a new one just so we can go through all the process. And then you can import content. So you can import content in the form of a Power BI PBIX file. In this case, they have a sample report that'll work good for our example. So we'll go ahead and just use that. And then we're going to grant permissions. So it's as simple as granting permission. All right. And so you'll see on the side over here, we have a summary. So it says who I am It then gives me my application ID, my workspace ID, and a report ID. And these are going to be really important to us later on in the demonstration as we go in to see this is how we're going to actually access and embed our information directly into our application. You also get the ability to download a sample app, which is a really nice little ASP.NET MVC application that allows you to kind of go through and test this process, and we'll go ahead and do that as well. So go ahead and if you're following along, go ahead and download that sample app, and you can open that up, and all you need is I think it's Visual Studio 2013 or above for that. All right. Okay, so once you get that down and get that extracted, open up that sample application. We're going to need just to do a couple of things to get that to work with our data in our account. So we're going to update the web config. We're going to use that application ID, workspace ID, and report ID that we just created. I'll also go through and show you how to kind of find your own if you want to use a different workspace or a different report in the same example. You can also provide and then we'll provide your Power BI account name and password, and then we'll walk through that REST API, the .NET SDK, on how we're going to build that report token. The report token is a key element to being able to pull in that Power BI data. We'll go back to our demo. Pull up that sample. And so again, the first thing we want to do is to go into our web config in this environment, and then we'll be able to put in that application ID, that workspace ID, report ID, and then our Power BI username and password. I can just get those right off of here. And you could also have other ones. So if you're not limited to just reports, you can embed any visualization that you have in Power BI. So if you want to do a dashboard or something else, you can definitely put those in as well, or any other kind of tile. And then I don't think anybody needs to see my password. I'll take that different screen and save that. All right. You can also get, like I said, you can also get those directly from Power BI. So if I go back in here and just go to my Power BI account, hopefully it's not cranky with me this time. There you go. And so I can go into any workspace I want to and pick a report. And then I can get that workspace, which is the information after the groups, or the report ID from after the reports, or dashboard ID if it was after the dashboards. So I can get any of that information, and I could utilize that information as long as my app is authorized to access my Power BI account. So as long as I have that access, that authorization set up, it doesn't matter necessarily which workspace I pick, which report I pick when I go through that process. All of that is just for the simplification to show you the different IDs as you go through. But you can go into your own Power BI account and pick any of these from any of your workspaces or any of your visualizations. Okay. And so that was it. All I have to do is put that in, and then if we look at our references here, we'll see we have a we have the maybe we have Power. There it is. We have the Power BI API, and then we also have, if we go down to the scripts folder, we also have the Power BI JavaScript SDK. So we have all of that information loaded by default into this application. So if we go ahead and launch this, I'm going to put a stop there. I got that. So when my application comes up, it'll give me three different options. I can do an embedded report, an embedded dashboard, or an embedded tile. And so when I did the authorization step, I only selected a report, and I only got that report key. That's the only thing I put in. But through the SDK, I can actually go through and cycle through all of the workspaces that are in my account. I can cycle through all the reports, all the dashboards, and utilize the SDK to pick those for me. So we'll click the report here. And so when it launches that up to my home controller, we can kind of walk through this. So I'm going to have an embed config, which is a model in my MVC. It's going to create a new one of those. I'm going to go and get the config error, so it's just going to go and check to make sure that all the configuration information has been entered correctly. Check for errors on that. It's then going to do that. Use this use password credential, and this is going to be important later when we get to the second example. But that's using the Microsoft Identity Model at the directory, and that's what's actually going to. It's going to get an authorization token back from Microsoft that says yes, you can go in and access this account. Then we're going to get an authorization context, and that's actually going to go out and get the token for this specific report. As long as all that returns back.
Hey, Brian.
So we're going to we have our
static on. It seems like people are saying that there's a little bit of static. It's just a little bit of static, so I'm not sure if you can just like readjust something, but they're hearing a little bit of static on your audio.
Okay. All right, let me know if that's any better. If it's still a problem in a minute or so, I can just switch to my phone headset. I'm just on the computer audio, so
yeah, it just went in and out right then and there. It's kind of like a robotic sound almost.
Okay. Well, I could give me just a second.
Okay.
And I'll switch over if I call in. All right, Crystal, can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is that any better?
It sounds better so far. So we'll just keep an eye on it.
We'll give that a try. We'll give that a try. Oh, no problem. All right, so where were we? So this is our access token that we created. So we logged in using our application ID and our credentials. We were able to get an authorization, and now we have that authorization token, and we're going to send that, and that's what's actually going to allow us to access our Power BI content. And then from there, we'll create a new Power BI client using the API URL and our token. And then here's where you can use this SDK to do your API calls for you and go out. So this one is actually going to go out and get all of the reports that are in the group, in that group ID that I sent it, that workspace ID. And then tell me I have one report in there. If I had more than one, I could pick between those. access different information about them from that returned from the API. So in this case, I said if I don't have a report ID, I'm going to get the first one, or if I do, I'm going to go out and get the report ID that I identified. I got that. We're then going to go out and create, get the data sets so that we have access to be able to drill through and do some other things with the data. Going to do some other checking for some other little things in the demo. And so now I have I got my report ID, my workspace ID, all of my parameters, and I went out to my reports and generated a token that's going to identify specifically the report that I want to view embedded in my report. And then I'm going to assign that to my result model, my embedded token, the URL, and then the ID of the report that I want to view. And then send that back. I'll bring up my report, and I will have my embedded information. So just like if I was in Power BI, I have complete control of that data through this visualization. I can do things like filters or slicers in this case, Power BI. I can also go over and have access to my filters if I want to do that as well. And then you can also do multiple tabs. So we have, in this case, a multiple tabbed report. And you can even do things like the map capabilities, anything like that. So you have all the capabilities that you have in your Power BI for a regular user to be able to access that. And then through those APIs, you can also do additional things like let them create their own criteria, let them save things, let them do other functionality within that. All right, so we'll get out of there. And so then the third step we talked about was the interacting. So how do we do that? We're going to do that using our Power BI JavaScript SDK. And when we look at that, the other thing we're going to look at is the sample tool. There's a really cool tool that's put out by the Power BI embedded team that gives you all kinds of code examples and lets you apply those, run them, try different things, and apply those so that you can easily apply those to your embedded instance in your application. And I'll have this on another sheet as well with some other references. We'll go back to our demo. Okay, so that JavaScript we talked about, we have the JavaScript SDK loaded, and so that's why we have this Power BI JavaScript file. Look at that; it's just got all of the JavaScript in it that's needed to run the Power BI functionality in the background. If I go over to my embedded report view, and kind of look through that. So it's really not that complex. We're calling the script to get use the Power BI JavaScript file. We also have that embedded config in our MVC model. And then it's got some little error checking, make sure that you entered enough information to make it work. But the real key to it is this little section right here. So we have a div with the ID of report container. Then in our JavaScript script here, we're getting our access token from our model. We're getting our embedded URL and our report ID. And then we're calling this model from the SDK and then entering that configuration. So all we're putting in here is that access token, token type. We're telling it that it's going to be an embedded report. We're giving it all the permissions that we have available for that. And then you can do some other settings, like in this case, you can turn the filter panel off and on. So maybe I'll turn that off. And then you can, the navigation of the content panel enabled. Then it's going to go out, get that container. So our report container, again, was that was the ID of where we were going to put the visualization from Power BI. Some other checking here for that. And then here, it's going to call out to the Power BI embed function in our JavaScript SDK, give it the container and the configuration information that tells us what we want to load, and then that's what loads up that report directly in there. So I said the other cool thing you can do is you can go into the Power BI developer samples, and you can actually use a tool they call, oh, that's not what I wanted. Good page 2, but this is the page I wanted. You can go in and use the sample tool. So if you go in here, they have all different kinds of visualizations that you can kind of access and look at. But if you select one of those, it takes you over to this code tab. And here you can give different kinds of capabilities. You can say, do you want them to be able to have create mode, view mode, edit mode, and then it's going to give the token here of the demo. You can actually enter in your own token here and use their tool with your actual visualization from Power BI, which is kind of interesting to do. But then it gives you all of the code that you need to be able to run whatever you're looking for, all the JavaScript code for that. And what I've seen, they say that it has anything that they have available, that's what you'll be able to find here. So if I run that, yeah, I messed something up. Lots of browser troubles today. There we go. And so you can, here's the sample of that visualization. So this is all the JavaScript code you need to make this visualization happen based off this complex visualization that was set up in Power BI. So all of their work was done in Power BI, not within your application. And so the other thing you can do is you can go over to this Interact tab. And this gives you all of that kind of base level control over how the visualization is going to work and how you're going to handle it, doing things like filters, applying things like filters in code, applying things like navigation in code. So let's try one of these. We'll do set the page. So we'll set, instead of our visualization that we have in our example has 2 pages. So instead of having it be the first page always come up, let's set it to be the second page. Yeah, set the active page. And so again, it's going to give us all of that JavaScript code that we needed right here. We can run that. So active page was set to sentiment. And then it's going to take us over to that tab within our Power BI. So we can just copy that code and we can put that directly in to our own application. All right. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just create a JavaScript function. Call it set page. and then we'll just paste that code that we got from the sample tool. And then we'll, instead of page, set it to be the first page. Since it's an indexed list, it starts with a 0 index list. We'll pick the second page, which would be number 1. And then in our script that we had before, we'll just add a little section to tell it that for our report on loaded, which is a event on the report, we'll do a function, and we'll just let it go to the console so that we know that it got loaded. And then we'll call our loading function. So what this is going to do is once it gets the report and embeds that, once that's completed, it's going to fire this loaded event. And then on the loaded event, we're going to go down to our set page. Oh, I need to actually set page, right? Set page function. We'll stop that, launch our application again. That run. And you saw it came up with that first regional sales analysis. And it came up with the first regional sales analysis, but then right at the end, it switched to the geographic analysis when it hit our JavaScript function in our application. So just like that, we were able to embed complex analytics and visualizations from Power BI directly into our application. We were able to control that and make some changes with it using the SDK, and all of that was pretty simple. So let's do another example. We got a little bit more time here. We'll do another example, go into a real world example. So this is one that I've actually done. When we have at Pragmatic Works, we actually have customers that are doing this or looking at doing this, that we're helping out with that. So any help that you need, you're welcome to contact us regarding that. This is a customer-facing application that I worked with that has specific data based on the login. So you're going to get different visualization, different information from Power BI based off who's logging in. But we threw another wrinkle in. It's actually, instead of an ASP.NET MVC application, it's an ASP.NET Core application. So that throws a few things, and we'll take a look at the challenges with that as we go through it here in just a second. We needed some analytics about documents and physicians. It's a physician portal, and so that's what we wanted them to know which physicians were logging in, who had viewed their documents, who had completed their documents, things like that. And I also had a visualization that I had previously created with a Telerik chart controls, and so we'll kind of look at the differences between those two functionalities. All right. And so we'll just, to get kind of a baseline, we'll just launch this application. Hopefully. It doesn't get browser cranky on me again. There we go. And so this application actually has two separate logins, one for individual customers of the customer, and then it has an admin one, which is for our customers to log in and see how their systems are being used. So we'll log in there. We start out with just a basic dashboard. We got a visualization. This is visualization using the Telerik.NET controls. And so it's okay. It's got some little stuff. It flashes, it does some things, but nothing like we're normally going to see in a Power BI visualization. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, what we're going to do is we're going to register this application in, we're going to register this application for use in Power BI. But instead of doing it through the setup tool like we did before, I'm going to go in and actually do it in Azure to kind of show you how that works a little bit. So this would be if you have an Azure Active Directory. I'm going to sign in here and go to my portal. Again, you can get this account, I think, also has a free option as well. But your organization, if you have things in the cloud, you're going to have this somewhere along the way anyway. So you have your Azure Active Directory, and then we have this folder called App Registrations. And so we're going to actually see, I have my Webinar 01, which I just created right here. There's our embedded ID that we looked at before. We can go in and change some of the other settings along with that as well. So we'll go back and we'll create actually a new application. We'll call this Webinar 02. We'll call it native. And you'll notice that the only thing we have here is a redirect URI. We don't have anything, we don't have that workspace ID and that report ID that we got through the other tool. Like I said before, I think those, or like I said before, those aren't really, those really don't make any difference. Because you can pick through the SDK any report, any dashboard that you want. That way, and then and you don't have to specifically specify it when you're registering. I'm going to create that. It's going to give me my application ID. So there's the key thing that I'm looking for. I'm going to go into the settings, and then the only thing I really need to do is I have to give it some permissions. So I have to tell it that this particular application, because you can put other things in this in Azure, but so we have the Azure Active Directory, and then we're going to add the Power BI service. We'll delegate all the permissions, so it just tells you you have to be an admin to do this. And again, these are the same permissions that we had on our setup tool that we used before. We're just manually doing this in the background. And I'll be done. Select that. Grant permissions. Same thing I did in the last step through the tool. Got it? Okay, grant permissions. All right, and so now I can go back and I have my application ID that I'm going to need to set up this application, set up my new application to use Power BI. The other things I'm going to need to do are I need to add in my Power BI SDK and my JavaScript SDK. So I do that. There's a lot of different ways you can do that, and the easiest for visualization purposes here is to do it through the Visual Studio NuGet tool. So we will put in Power BI, and we want the Power BI API and the Power BI JavaScript. We can also put in the core, but I don't think for our example we're not going to use anything for that. Select that. Oh, looks like I already installed it. So thought I had uninstalled that. So you would install those through there and install the JavaScript. I did. Oh, hadn't installed that. You'll notice the little yellow kind of warning symbols here. because these things, because the Power BI app is actually a .NET 4 .NET Framework 4 application and not a .NET Core application. That's why it's telling us that that's not really the right thing for this particular application. In most cases, that's going to be fine. It's not going to bother you, but that's one of the things we're going to have a problem with as we go through, because some of the API functionality isn't going to work in .NET Core the way it did in .NET MVC. And we'll see we have our JavaScript is in here now, so we're good to go with that. And then we're just going to add our parameters. Again, in .NET Core, you don't have a web config, but we do have an app settings folder, which works just about the same. I kind of got that pre-populated, so I'll just paste that in. So we got our application ID, our workspace ID, a report ID, and again, I just got those from inside the Power BI, utilizing the information in the command line. So for my example, I took my workspace there, my report ID there, and then my application ID. But I'll go ahead for this example and change the application ID to be that one. Okay. And again, I'll drag that off, put in my password. And then the other thing we would need is that model. So we need that that MVC model where we're going to send the information once we do the calls to Power BI. So I'll create a new model here. Oh, I already got one. Okay. So I just copied that model out of the sample application that they had. And then we'll go over to our home controller here. And right now, all we're doing is returning the view. We're just returning whatever is in that form. So we need to change this a little bit to be able to make it so that we can, again, access our parameters that we set up. And then in our, so we're going to have a config, so we can get our config information from our settings. We'll have our variables that are holding that information. And then we have a controller that's going to take our configuration, website configuration, and put that into the parameters so that we can use those. And then we're going to go down and change this index so that, and we'll just put most of that same code that we had from the sample application and use that to return that information. Got a couple of errors, web config, that's another block of code that we can copy out of the sample application. And then our other errors, it says authenticate sync. So in our other sample application, we had that functionality where it was going out and it was authenticating us against the Microsoft login information. Well, we can't do that in ASP.NET Core. That's one of the things that they removed. So what we're going to have to do is kind of create our own way to do that. But one of the things with the embedded Power BI embedded is that you have access to all of these underlying API calls. I'm just going to kind of copy and paste this. So what I've done here is I just created my own function that does the same thing, just creates a API call directly to the Power BI APIs and gets that authentication token for me. Otherwise, this is very similar to what we did before. I just took out some of the kind of extra stuff that we didn't need. But we're going to go out, get that authentication token, bring that token back, send that back in to get our information from Power BI, get our list of reports for our workspace, get our specific report we want, and then send that information down to our page. And so then now all we need to do to make this work is to go down to our views and our home view. And we'll copy again, just copy and paste. I'm going to delete out that old Kendo or Telerik code out of there. And I will post in my JavaScript from the other example. And paste in my report container, just like we had before. I did a little bootstrap on it to make it a little prettier. And then the other thing we need is to be able to send down the model. So previously we didn't have a model in this particular view, so we will send down our embedded config model. So we have our model, we have our container, and then that same JavaScript that we had before takes our token, our URL, and our ID, and then brings back our report for us. So hopefully I did that pretty quick. We'll see if this works. Still thinking about it. Oh, I did forget one thing. I need to call the SDK. So add that script to my page. Give it another try. There we go. And I brought in, instead of those kind of little hokey charts, now I have my data hasn't updated today, but I got my nice Power BI visualizations. I can click, I can see the records, I can do my drill throughs. I also can do multiple tabs if I want to. So you have all that functionality that you would have in Power BI, in a Power BI visualization. You can embed that directly into your application. I know that was quick, but I hope that was somewhat helpful to you. Some resources. It's great. There's a lot of great stuff out there on the Power BI sites and the Microsoft GitHub. They have a lot of stuff in the Power BI samples for both the app owns the data and the user owns the data models. They also have a lot of other good examples in the developer samples. You can also a lot of great information on their developer site, on the Power BI developer site, and in the Azure developer site as well. And the other fun thing is, the best thing about it is that the Power BI embedded gets any new features that come out in Power BI. So they're almost immediately available in Power BI embedded. And so this goes back to that cool factor. So you can continue for your end users to get those cool things that they're looking for. So the new functionality comes out. this is just some of the stuff that came out in yesterday's Power BI blog post about some of the new functions they're adding. Some of the cool ones, the Azure Resource Health Monitoring. You can find all kinds of information there in Azure on how the status and the health of your Power BI embedded metrics. You can also use metrics that are available for embedded reports and dashboards. It enables the authors of the reports to measure the impact that they're actually getting from that analytics. So how often they're being used, what type of content's being viewed, where they need to put more emphasis, and then you can do like an executive view of analytic engagement across your entire organization or your entire customer base. So a lot of great new things are coming out as well, and those are exciting things in Power BI. So kind of short on time, but any questions? Looks like there's some questions.
Do you see them in there, Brian?
I'm trying to.
If you like where it says questions, if you just take the square with the arrow and hit it, it'll make it bigger for you too as well. Let me see if there's some in here though. Yes, guys, the recording will be available of the webinar. As usual, you guys will receive a link tomorrow. Let me see.
Can't get any bigger for some reason.
Let me see. Here, I can just read them off to you. You got quite a bit in here.
Sorry, I can't get them to big. Oh, there we go. Okay, I figured it out.
Okay. Got some of them.
Why no Power BI option? Not sure what that means. Mic's hot still. Static on the audio. Oh, somebody sent out the link for the embedded setup. That was nice. I guess my audio still wasn't that great.
It got better at the end.
Sure. Somebody asked about the script to create this. Like I said, I just, if you log in, get a Power BI Pro account, you can just go through and it'll actually download the same demo that I used as part of that, as the embed setup. So you can walk through that right there. So. Can we embed Power BI in an Angular application? Yes, you can. So yeah, any application where you can use API calls in JavaScript, you can do it. So and the recording will be available. The analytic data, in this case, I mean it is Power BI .com. It is the web-based. But the data is actually in that particular, the examples I used, the data was Azure database data, but you could use on-premise data. You can use any kind of data that you can get access to in Power BI to show up there. You do not need a premium license. You only need a pro license. That's one of the benefits of using the embedded is you don't have to give the premium licenses you don't need a premium license to be able to access that functionality. It does work with dashboards. You just need to access the dashboard function instead of the reports function in the SDK. So if you had, where's my example application? So in your home controller, instead of getting reports, you can also, there's also a oh yeah, if you get the reports. So yeah, instead of from reports, you would just go dashboards. And I think in this example, I'm pretty sure that one of them is a dashboard. don't have that on the blog. Let's see. Yes, you can embed. I'm not sure about the SharePoint version. I'd have to look that up. I'm not sure which versions of SharePoint you can use the Power BI embedded, but I know you can use it, at least in SharePoint Online. So that would be something I have to research to see if that was possible or not. We find a sample for Angular. Yeah, if you just search Power BI embedded and Angular, I bet you would find there are a lot of good samples out there. And if you're using a .NET framework type of environment, you can still use that .NET SDK, which exposes, which has wrappers for all the API calls that you'd want to do. No, you only need one Pro license to be able to do the embedded. So the Pro license is only for that kind of main account where you're doing the authorization. So not everybody needs. Most people won't need a Pro account. You can just use a regular Power BI account for other people that are creating content for you. You just need the one Pro account to be able to use the embedded functionality. And here was the dashboard. In that example, there is a workspace doesn't have any dashboards. I'm sure I had done a dashboard one before. But yeah, I know when I was working on this on the presentation last week that I did an example with a dashboard in it, and that worked fine. You just had to use the dashboard portion of the SDK instead of the reports function. All right, I think we're a little over, Crystal.
Yes.
I guess.
Yeah,
I guess for a long time.
You're good. It's about 5 minutes over, which is fine.
Capacity. I didn't get into capacity. There is a white paper on the Azure Power BI page, Power BI embedded page, that talks about capacity. So you don't have to have dedicated capacity. I haven't done that. It's just at a certain point for performance perspective, you would want to add capacity. But like I said, there's a whole white paper on that particular subject on there.
All right, perfect. Well, I just want to say thank you, Brian, for coming in and hosting this webinar. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And as for everybody else, I know the questions were, will it be recorded? It should be up on the website by the end of the day, but you guys will also receive the recording link in your email tomorrow. So just look at that, probably about around this time, probably about noon. So just look out for that. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Brian or myself or anybody else on the Pragmatic Works team. We appreciate you guys joining so much, and you guys have a great day.